Welcome to Dad Hammer, Bolters and Booze, where we discuss all things Warhammer while staying hydrated with an adult beverage. I am David, the Warboss, and I am joined by the most generic Space Marine in the Imperium, Mr. Medicae Steve. Steve, how we doing?
Doing great, man. Just hanging out, enjoying my week off, which, sometimes it's like a week off, but sometimes it's not. This week it's like a week off. It's great.
Oh, any chores? You had lots of chores this week? Honeydew?
Not really.
Oh,
Not really.
okay,
Just
good.
kind of catching up.
Any
Just little
Warhammer?
things.
Any Warhammer in there on your week off?
Just a lot of painting. I haven't got any playing in, but my main man is doing the Emperor's work himself.
Well, good. I'm glad you're making use of your time wisely. You're not doing anything really responsible.
No, getting tattoos, that kind of stuff.
Like you do on your week off.
That's what I do.
You didn't go to Mexico for that, right? You stayed.
Oh, no.
Did you stay local?
Just keeping it classy, man.
Just seems like, when you go on spring break, right? That's what you do. You go to Cancun, you get a tattoo.
Dude, that's terrifying. What like exposure I've had. That's very terrifying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to each their own, I guess.
Do what you do, man.
Well, glad you're doing well, sir. And
how you doing?
I'm doing great. Feeling good. Excited to be recording another podcast. And we have a really action-packed show. Action-packed, I'm going to say. Filled with action. That's right. We're going to talk about all the new 10th edition Warhammer 40k stuff. That's been the theme for us lately. But we really do have a great show. We're going to talk about the 10th edition Combat Patrol, one of the new modes that game modes that they've talked about recently. The Crusade rules, the new Crusade rules, very similar to the 9th edition, but I think with some skews onto it for 10th edition. Then we'll go into the faction rules that were released. Lots of new factions: Necrons, Chaos Space Marines, Astra Militarum, Votann, Chaos Demons. There's all kinds of stuff that they've shown off, and we'll talk about that. And then we'll also provide some healthy casual dad perspective, I'll say, on the whole competitive versus casual topic and determining, what's a good army and how that plays into your army selection. So we'll discuss that. And then finally, we'll round out the show with our hobby corner, where we'll talk about some tips for staying motivated to finish your hobby projects, even with a busy dad schedule like you and I both have. So that'll be something of interest to our listeners that are looking for time and trying to find it in order to spend on our hobby. Not everybody can just take a week off like you can, Steve. So,
This is true. You have to have special passes and lots of hard work to get there.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So in order for me to take off, I need to work hard. Okay, got it. That's good. Good tip.
You got to apply yourself.
Well, this is a podcast where we give life advice and professional advice, not just hobby advice. I like it.
Oh man, this is true.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't follow all of it though.
Okay, just some. That's good. Good to know.
Just some of
it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for everyone listening, and we are very excited to kick things off. If you do like what you're hearing on these shows that we're doing here, make sure to rate, follow, subscribe, like button, anything that you want to throw out there on our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen. And then also look for us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and then maybe even MySpace, for the people with we should put up a MySpace account, just
that's brilliant.
For old time's sake, with some MIDI music, some chip tunes.
Some 8-bit stuff. Man, that's good idea.
Yeah, that's just because we're old, and so we're allowed to do that. But check us out on the social media sites where we're going to be linking, of course, to our podcast, but also showing pictures of the models that we're working on and painting, especially leading up to 10th edition, doing some product demonstrations and whatnot. So check us out there. But first, all that, there's the advertising. That's all the advertising you're going to hear. Let's get to the real important stuff, the most important part of every single Dad Hammer podcast, which is, what are we drinking? And I will kick things off because mine's not as impressive as yours, Steve. My drink's a little bit of a cheat. It's the lazy man's cocktail, but it's still very, very wonderful. I am using a cocktail mixer from a local distributor here out of Nashville called Barman Nashville, and I'll link to it in the description. But it is, I think it's called either Summer Squall or Spring Squall. I don't know, one of the two. It's a seasonal cocktail mix, and it's like it's almost like a pineapple orange juice, fruity type mix, and then you just add some rum to it, some white rum, and it's really good. It reminds me a little bit of like a what do you call it, like a screwdriver, a
Okay.
little bit of that. So it's good. I enjoy it. That's what I am drinking tonight. What are you drinking? Because I'm looking at the recipe here, and it's a hefty. It's a lot of alcohol in this one. So why don't you break it down for us?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a quote, and I quote from the Warhammer40k Lexicanum. Warp Rift is a point in real space that interfaces with the warp to form a stable exit and entry point, so the use of warp drives is not required. This drink will put you into a parallel dimension without a doubt. So, yeah, so buyer be warned, your mileage may vary, but here's a recipe. So actually, this is the original drink is called a Tipsy Turtle. So, but man, Warp
That
Rift,
sounds lame though. Let's
it
change that up. Warp Rift is so
it
much
does.
better.
Warp Rift is where it's at.
Okay.
So it's a half ounce of light rum, half ounce of dark rum, half ounce of Captain Morgan spiced rum, half ounce of 151 proof rum, whatever you can find, because that's a little sketchy these days. Half ounce of vodka, half ounce of orange juice, half ounce of grenadine, and 4 ounces of pineapple juice. I
Dang.
don't recommend. Yeah, I don't recommend eyeballing this one uh, because it's kind of a one and done drink, man.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mess around with it a whole lot, but it's really good. Uh, in all disclosure, it's from one of our favorite restaurants. My wife and I. It was the Melting Pot before it got
Yeah.
blown up in the Christmas bombing around here.
Mm.
What was that, 2 or 3 years ago,
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So they had a drink called the Tipsy Turtle, and I had to finally I tracked down the recipe. I actually had one of the wait staff give it to me, so that was pretty nice of them. But it's truly my wife's favorite drink, and it is one that you drink one when you go out. People, don't drink two and go home because you're gonna go to jail.
It'd be upside down turtle,
Yeah, it's gonna be
immobile turtle.
yeah, help! I can't get up. No, it's really tasty. You don't, even though it has all that alcohol in it, it's not really offensive to your senses.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, it's a good by the pool drink since we're kind of keeping with that that theme.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought Warp Rift was definitely an appropriate name
Yeah.
for this one.
It sounds like it'll definitely put you in the warp and keep you there.
You'll at least see things if you're not careful.
That's right. Well, man, that it does look, quite involved. But man, I'm gonna have to try this though. It sounds pretty tasty. It's much easier than my cheat drink. But man, I tell you what, my cocktail is really good. I don't really have a cool name
Yeah,
for it other than the Summer Squall, which is what it was called. But we'll go with
yeah.
the Warp Rift, which sounds much more imposing. And
That guy has a good product, man.
that's true.
No lie.
Yep. Well, man, good luck with your Warp Rift. Don't, as they say on the Captain Morgan ads, pace yourselves, captains.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, cheers, Steve, and bottoms up.
Cheers, David.
All right, so we are well on our way to continuing to stay hydrated. So let's get into some 10th edition Warhammer 40,000 news, and it's coming every day. I mean, now it's like it's 2 or 3 articles a day. It seems they're doing different game mode rules, they're doing faction rules, they're doing all kinds of stuff, and we got a lot to talk about today. Let's first go over the new Combat Patrol box. That has been something that, for those that are not within the ninth edition scene, they came out with this box set back in the early days of ninth called the Combat Patrol, which is really just a way for you to dip your toe into an army, and it came with a kind of a smattering, um, the number of models in it, and it gave you a good mixture. They weren't always the best mixture of
Yeah,
models.
it was a little bit of a misnomer in some ways.
Yeah, you might have a maybe a vehicle, or depending on what kind of army. I remember for orcs, it had just lots of different troops, and it came with some of the Defcopters, the helicopter things, and one of the Def Dreads, which is like the mech within the orcs. So
Oh yeah,
it
yeah,
gave you a good mixture, just depending on the army, but it wasn't always a way just to walk out and say, okay, I'm going to put this on the board and
right.
and be ready. So they have tried to address that now with the new rules for combat patrol, a very specific mode, which I'll just hit the highlights. But in essence, it is they've taken the new data sheets that they're coming out for 10th, which we've seen several of, and they've got all the rules and everything, which I love. I love the whole notion of data
Oh
sheets.
yeah,
Um, Very similar to Age of Sigmar. They took that kind of the game mechanic from Age of Sigmar, and now they've got these data sheets. But for Combat Patrol, they've simplified it. So they've even removed rules, removed some of the weapons so that you don't have all the options. And I think the goal is to just make it easier for new players to come in, or even veterans, as they say, to be able to pick up one of these combat patrol boxes for an army they haven't played with, played, put on the table or even built or anything like that, and then have these rules to come in and say, okay, now I don't have to learn, I don't have to buy the codex since all the rules are free. Um,
right.
I could just go buy this box, I put together the models, and now I can download these sheets, and I don't have to learn all the nuances of every single, nook and cranny of every single unit. And I think the attempt here is that the combat patrol box will give you just, here you go, base level, get in and learn a few of the mechanics of the army and get going. So let's see and I know you've had a chance to look at this. What are your thoughts initially, and how are you feeling on this combat patrol?
I think this is how it should have always been. The other combat patrol boxes, you could buy them, but they weren't incredibly balanced. So the combat patrol box of one faction was not equal to the combat patrol of another faction,
Right.
either in points or power level on the board or how useful they were. I mean, it was not a good beginner way to get into the hobby. I mean, to get into the hobby, yes, model wise, but to play the game, probably not, because you had to still think about how you were going to build your units out, what you were going to pick. This is very, and I hate to keep referring back to it, but this is very kill team like. So the box is your list, and I like that, especially if someone is just getting into it. Because this has been a hobby that the price point can be the barrier. So
Oh
what
yeah.
a combat patrol box is usually under $200, right?
Yeah.
Give or take like
Yeah.
$130, something like
Yeah,
that.
I think it's closer to 100. I want to say 120, 130. And
Okay.
then depending on, if you've got a local game store that provides a little bit of a discount, that's even better. But
Right.
but yeah, I mean, you can buy one of these boxes, and because I think before, the way I felt is I could buy this combat patrol, kind of what you were saying is that I buy this box, but I never really felt like I had a complete force to even play a smaller game, because
Not
it
really.
wasn't really balanced. Like if I bought a
No.
box of orcs and then I played against, and you bought a box of Necrons or bought a box of Space Marines, there it just seemed a little unbalanced, where one force is just going to take over the other. Because, for example, with orcs, the big benefit, or the main core mechanic of orcs, is just numbers of models. I mean, they're a dime a
Right.
dozen, they're a horde army, so I need lots of orc boys, to be, I mean, there's ways that you can get around it, but I needed lots of bodies, and the combat patrol box is only going to give you so much. And I just
Hmm.
never felt like I was going to be competitive if you were going to be rolling up to me with a combat patrol box of Space Marines.
And some of the old boxes honestly felt like it was the sprues of the models that they had sitting in the warehouse that weren't selling well. Um, a lot of push fit stuff, not necessarily push fit, but monopose things sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
or most of the time. Now the price point reflects that. I mean, I'll give it credit for that, but some of it just didn't fit together well. Even though it was faction specific, it just was kind of off. Especially in the Space Marines. Yeah, they were weird boxes. Like this. You have a Blood Angels box, you have a Death Watch or a Dark Angel, the Space Wolves, but none of the components really fit the specific faction
Yeah.
as well as it could have, in the codex or whatever. So I always thought it was kind of funny. I like the old Start Collecting boxes because they felt like they had just a few more models in it that pushed it over that edge to where that was a really good box to start with.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that really what I always struggled with is if I bought especially a new player coming in, and you walk into a Warhammer store and you just see all of this stuff. I mean, there's just tons of models and boxes and large box sets with two armies in it. Then you got the smaller boxes, which would be the combat patrol, or now you got the boarding patrol, and it's so overwhelming to a new player.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, they should have, and I think this is their attempt to do it, but you come in and you say, okay, I want to start playing, what do I need? And now that the rules are free, you don't have to say, oh, okay, well, now if you're playing Space Marines, you got to buy this box or this codex,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got to buy the chapter codex, and then you got to start with the combat patrol. Oh, but you're also playing this one, so you might want to start with this combat patrol. There's just so many options, and now I think you can just roll in and you get your combat patrol, you put those together. The only thing that's missing for me in this is, okay, now what? Now what do I do?
Yeah.
After I buy the combat patrol and I like the game, then it is the next step just to go buy what looks cool. Is that what they're going for?
Yeah, or another box. Or a second combat patrol box, maybe.
Yeah, but that's
Um,
I mean,
I know it's kind of lame. I'm not gonna. Yeah, I'm just
yeah,
saying you could do that.
that's true.
Um, but yeah, I know what you're saying. But it would give you a good foundation.
Mm-hmm.
You could see what you like. I think about this from the perspective of either an aunt or an uncle or a parent or a grandparent, and you got a young kid who's interested in 40K, and they just can't let it go. They want to try it, and you can say, "Hey, Uncle Steve, I'm putting on my Christmas list this Tyranid Combat Patrol box." You're like, all right, cool. I can buy you that box. You can get started. You have a friend that does it, or Uncle Steve come over and play.
Yeah.
And you don't
Yeah.
you don't even have to have necessarily terrain, because another part of the new edition is going to be great. You can go get like cheap railroad terrain from Hobby Lobby and make a forest, and that could be your first battlefield. Whatever. I feel like I look at this from the eyes of a young kid, maybe late early teens,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
that doesn't have a lot of money, or they have a relative who knows nothing about 40K, right? But they go into a store, they're like, this is what he asked for. He's set, or she set. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the only other thing that I would um, maybe roll into this which would be, because you get the combat patrol box, and if you don't know what you're getting into, which is building models, you're going to get this box home, you're going to open it up, and you're going to be like, oh man, I guess, do I need to get scissors? Do I just twist these things out? What do
Right,
I do?
right.
And I almost wish they had a starter hobby kit, and I know they kind of do, but something that's really geared right at the front of the store that says, here's your sprue clippers, here's your
Yeah.
file, their mold line remover, and here's super glue, plastic glue, whatever you want to use, but here's the kit that has the glue, the clippers, and the mold line remover, and this is the box. So you buy the combat patrol box, you buy this, and I mean, you don't have to paint them, but that'd be the next thing.
Right.
You could buy a starter
Hmm.
kit of paints, right? So I think they could do the slow drip of that, so that if grandma walks into the store and they want to get somebody everything that they need, it's because buying a combat patrol and giving it to someone is like, buying a toy for your kid on Christmas and then not getting the batteries.
Very fair. Yeah, you're
So
right.
I don't know.
No, you're very
I don't want
correct
to
there.
I don't want to dump on this, because really the point of all of this we're getting into semantics, but the point of all this, just as a new player's got your own hill to climb, and I think that's a separate conversation in itself. But
Right.
the other benefit, I think, for me, as I guess we're veteran players now, played for 3 or 4 years, um, that if I wanted to try another army, if I thought
Yes.
about, let me check out the Tyranids or Astra Militarum or whatever. If I want to try a new army, I can go buy a combat patrol box, and now that the rules are free, I don't have to worry about any additional. I have everything I need to
Mm-hmm.
to try out a new army for a relatively, that's all relative, but a relatively inexpensive price point.
Yeah. And in a mode that seems very much that beer and pretzels kind of deal. Like,
Yeah, which is
we could get
that's our
together.
jam.
It's where we live. But this could be too fun to do anything else. I mean, it's not going to replace everything else, but I mean, this could be a fun way to get, say, like our group of friends, right? That we chat with back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So what if like 4 or 6 of us want to get together at someone's house? Well, if we're all kind of veteran players, we could roll through maybe several games of Combat Patrol, and then everybody can sit back and make fun of each other while they're playing, and then it's your turn to get made fun of. But
that's very important that you include that, because and we'll get into the competitive versus casual scene a little later. But I think, so, just not to segue, but there, or to rabbit trail, but one of the most important and fun aspects of this is making fun of the other person in our casual group, because nobody takes this ourselves too seriously.
exactly.
But just making fun of each other and talk about our successes and failures, which I think is great. So I always like to, I agree that if this become a beer and pretzels mode, and then we could insert the making fun and poking fun of each other along with
Yeah.
it, I think that's an added benefit.
And if you're listening, GW, would it kill you to put 2 pages of how to trash talk your friends in the core book?
How
to trash talk your friend and still keep your friends.
Oh, yeah, that's an art. That is an art.
It's a subtle art.
I think it's also, you can trash talk someone as long as you're willing to trash talk yourself.
That's the best humor, man.
Yeah.
Self-deprecating humor is where I shine.
Yeah, you got to make fun of yourself, and then I think that gives you. It's almost like saying, "With all due respect," or "Bless your heart." I'd be like, I could totally make fun of you because I make fun of myself. Maybe we should do that as a how-to. This is how to make fun of your friends, but also maintain friendships. That's a whole Dad Hammer episode.
I think it's reasonable.
I think that the combat patrol stuff is going to be really neat. Go along with the new mode of combat patrol, and I think it kind of dovetails into this, is that you could combine both, because if you're doing a combat patrol, you're already a bit of a casual, I would say, and that's where we live. I don't mean casual as a derogatory term. I mean that is something that is near and dear to my heart. I want to be a casual player, enjoy the game.
Yeah.
But they have also shown off the new version of the crusade mode, which I think you could combine the whole combat patrol purchase of the box, and then start with this crusade mode, which is, for those who aren't aware, this is more of a narrative. I'm looking at the article here now. It says that it's crusades are typically more laid back and story driven than match play, and place an emphasis on thematic confrontations, which when you and I play, and especially when we play with our other friends, we're always trying to frame, why are we here? Why are these two armies facing each other? And I like the crusade, I like the narrative stuff. I never really got into the 9th edition crusade, because as much as the combat patrol, this new box is looking at simplifying and keeping things easier to learn, I felt that even in 9th, and also now in 10th, just looking at the article, that Crusade almost makes it more complicated. They're adding the RPG elements, more rules,
Right.
more paperwork, and I think that's for a certain type of casual player. If you really want to get into growing your force and coming up with themes for each of your units and figuring out what they did after the battle, to me that's just a little more work than I'm willing to do. But I applaud Games Workshop for coming up with different ways to reach their audience. So that's just my opinion, though. Steve, what's your take on the Crusade mode?
I think it's great. I mean, I think it's great that they're keeping up with it. They could have easily abandoned it, and there would have been a very sore segment of the population for sure.
Yeah,
Because there are a lot of people who they live and breathe the Crusade stuff. I think the drawback to Crusade, like you and I found, we didn't necessarily ditch our Crusade,
no,
but you kind of need a steady core of players who can get together frequently and put a lot of games on the board.
weekly. I mean,
Uh,
it's got to
we,
be, to me, weekly.
at least weekly,
Hmm.
because one, you have to keep it fresh. I think two, you quickly lose motivation and steam. And if you get sidetracked, I think that was our problem. We started getting like, hey, why don't we try a kill team today? You
Yeah,
know, we got a little time. Let's do that. And that might have been, that might have been our game time for the month. So trying to go 1 month and then skip a month and then get back to a crusade is very difficult. It's fun. I enjoy it. And I'm glad these rules feel a little better than the ninth edition rules. Just looking over them, I felt that, man, you could really, really get lost fast with some of what we were doing.
yeah, and I mean, getting lost, and not to be lost mentally. I don't, I don't mean that, but I mean, it feels like it sometimes with all the rules. But hopefully, they're addressing that with 10th. But
Yeah.
I feel like getting lost in a good way, kind of like you're getting lost in a story or a book or a movie. Um, you can really build up the narrative of the battles that you're playing against the opponent, and the things that I did like about the Crusade stuff in ninth is that you could pick names. I played Space Wolves, and their whole theme of the army was these
Yeah.
grizzled, war veteran and guys in the snow, almost like Vikings, and they would sit around a campfire and tell stories and say, "Oh, I'm gonna defeat this guy next time. I'm gonna, these huge, um, glory moments that they're talking about they're gonna do." And then you could fold that into the battles next time, and if you achieve them you got a bonus or a reward. To me, that is just really cool, and it still ended up being a little too much for me personally to keep
Yeah.
up with. And I'm looking at just scrolling through the page, and what's funny is that I'm looking at some of the battle scars, the two battle scars that, if you were to lose or to have one of the units killed in this crusade mode, you have a battle scar. It's either that or a battle honor, but
Right.
a battle scar is fatigued and battle weary. And I feel like, not to make the overly dad joke here, but that's what we're doing, that those battle scars are what I feel like after or during the crusade games, because I'm like, oh man, I got to keep up with more stuff and I got to get paperwork done.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot of paperwork. I remember the few games that we got into it. And then trying to figure the hard part was like you didn't want to lap your friend. And I felt like you quickly could.
Mm-hmm.
So if you lost a few one or two games in a row, I feel like your army, the way ninth edition rules were set up, you were so far behind. Um, you're going to be really hard pressed to catch back up. Like your opponent that you're crusading with or against is going to keep getting more and better stuff, um, better, battle honors, etc. And while you weren't necessarily punished for it, you didn't advance.
Right.
It feels like, it looks like this one you're gonna get some advancement even if you lose.
Yeah, it looks like they're addressing that with these crusade blessings, where
Right.
if you have a difference in the number of points, so they have crusade points. So if we play a game and you beat my army and I take significant losses and I have battle scars and all this other stuff, and then we play again, you're going to build up crusade points. Or even better, if you're playing several games and I haven't played in a month and you've gotten 3 or 4 games within this crusade and you've leveled up your army and you
Mm-hmm.
get all these crusade points. They actually have a system now where if I'm way behind, I get more blessings, and those blessings are buffs. You get extra XP at the end.
Right.
You can re-roll battle shock tests and things like that. So, well, I mean, this is an article that just touches on, I think, the high points of crusade,
Correct.
but I am excited to see where they take this, and we're definitely going to give it a whirl. I don't know if it's going to be the core focus of our group, just
Yeah.
because it will depend on how much paperwork we have to do.
And time.
Yeah, and time, but we'll see. I'm all up for a different way to play, especially one that's more narrative and thematic, and we'll see how this goes with 10th edition. All right, now let's switch over to the next bit here on 10th edition, which really has been all the news this previous week, which is their faction focus, where they literally every day, where they're coming out with a new, well, not new, but I guess new rules for the faction. Different faction every day. They went through Chaos Space Marines, Chaos Demons, Astra Militarum, Leagues of Votann, Necrons, just to name a few. And we'd already talked about Space Marines and Tyranids, Sisters of Battle. There were several, and they're coming out with new ones every day. And I would assume this is going to be the way that they do it up until release, which is now they've said June confirmed. So
Yeah.
I just want to talk about a few of these. The first two, and I want to lump them together a little bit, but not too much. The first two I want to talk about are both Chaos. So Chaos Space Marines. I am starting up a Chaos Force, and this is part of my pile of potential, but
Yeah, absolutely.
I got to get it done. But looking at the new rules, I don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time on each faction, but the one thing that I'll say, I think this is a really good theme for all the factions that we're getting ready to talk about, is that they've done a good job of giving you the feel and the theme and the power of each army, the strengths and weaknesses. And in the case of Chaos Space Marines, I think one of my favorite things, and something that's actually got me excited to play Chaos Space Marines, is that this whole notion of making pacts with the dark gods and sacrificing
Yeah.
your guys if you want to make a pact. So they have a core wide army rule. If your army, it's called Dark Pacts. If your army faction is Heretic Astartes, each time a unit with this ability is selected to shoot or fight, it can make a Dark Pact. If it does, select one of the following abilities for that unit's weapons to gain until the end of the phase, either lethal hits or sustained hits. Each time a unit makes a Dark Pact, after it has resolved its attacks, it must take a leadership test. If that test has failed, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds, which I think, if that doesn't scream chaos, right?
Oh
The
yeah.
risk reward, like, okay, I'm going to beseech the chaos gods to give me power and strength, and oh yeah, they're also going to murder me right after it's over.
Well, they want their part of the bargain,
They
right?
want that money. Yeah. So
Yeah, man.
I just think this is such a cool mechanic. Even though you might hate it, if you roll poorly, I guess, with your leadership tests. I
But
just
that's the fun of it.
yeah, it gives you that option. It makes you feel really awesome
Absolutely.
when you're playing Chaos Space Marines.
I mean, just anytime pray for diabolic boons. I mean, come on,
Don't get
man.
too
You,
excited.
you got to do that. I don't have it. I know I don't have any Chaos Space Marines,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I might before that's over.
Well,
No,
crap.
I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
I mean,
No, I'm just kidding.
you're gonna break into my house and steal all my guys. I see where this
It's
is going.
possible.
Yeah. Well,
We're gonna race for pink slips, pal.
but I mean, I think they did a really good job with the Chaos Space Marines, at least at the start here, showing off what makes them, chaotic. They
Yeah.
did a good job with that, and then the Chaos Demons, which I'm not a huge fan. I mean, the little monsters roaming around. Bellicor is really cool. I like some of the models, but I don't plan on playing the Chaos Demons. But they have their core army rule called the Shadow of Darkness, which I'll just summarize. Essentially, if you have
Okay.
your Chaos Demons, you have this Shadow of Chaos zone or realm that you're within your deployment zone. You're always in the Shadow of Chaos, but if you control half the objective markers in No Man's Land, that that territory of No Man's Land becomes the Shadow of Chaos. And then if you can get into your opponent's deployment zone and control half the objective markers there too, that's now the Shadow of Chaos. So just think about
Yeah.
the theme and the narrative of this looming shadow creeping over the land, almost like in Lord of the Rings, like with Mordor, where the shadow starts to take over the green parts of the world. Um, but then after that shadow gets there, it gives you penalties. For the if you're the enemy, you have to,
Yeah.
you lose. You take a penalty to your battle shock tests, and then there's terror. You subtract one, and if you fail it, you suffer D3 mortal wounds. I just like the idea of this creeping shadow and territory. The more that you let them go, the more terrified your army gets. I think that's really cool.
A- And then you get the warp rifts.
Which part? The
The
the drink or the power?
well, it's rolling right into it, isn't it?
And
The
it's
the mo-
plural. It's warp
yeah.
riffs.
Well, these guys have no shame. They'll be more than one. The demonic incursion. It's just because it flows with the our army's shadow chaos.
True. True.
So it could be set up 6 inches horizontally away from all models instead of 9. That's pretty. That's pretty spicy.
Yeah, I mean, and then you get that deep strike ability where,
Yeah.
I mean, instead of coming in at, yeah, like you said, at 9 inches, you come in at 6, and it just gives you that extra feeling of shadow. And then the final bit where the demonic pact essentially allows you to bring in chaos demons into your chaos force. So if you're someone like me
Yes.
playing Chaos Space Marines, I can now bring up to, if we're playing Strike Force, I can bring up to 500 points of demons. Or like our
Right.
friend, he's playing Chaos Knights, and he's got a bunch of big boys on the table. Well, now he can include, if he wanted to, some Chaos Demons, some cheaper Chaos Demons to run around and grab objectives. So,
Oh yeah.
my question to you, I know you're not a Chaos guy. Would that rule entice you to, I guess, the whole notion of allies? Does that entice you and to dabble a little bit?
Well, it's not getting too all far off the subject, but it's why I kind of got interested in the Slaves of Darkness Age of Sigmar army.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of similarities in what they're doing right here. You can take a mark of chaos, and you don't really necessarily have as many like demonic pact things. You're not adding other units from another faction or anything, but you get very specific buffs according to whatever mark of chaos god you choose.
Right.
But man, I like it because some of those the demon models, the chaos demon models,
Mm-hmm.
are just great.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them, I don't know what they're going to do in 10th, but a lot of people were really crying in their beer over some of these Zinch demons and stuff earlier in
Yeah.
ninth because they were just so powerful, and it
Right.
was just, I mean, they were literally auto hitting, and it didn't matter. There's Bellicor. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean,
See,
I think
it's a wonderful thing, I
I
think.
agree. I think the more that you can mix and match, and now of course, with the combat patrol, if you started a Chaos Space Marine army
Hmm.
and you wanted to pick up some demons, you just pick up a combat patrol box, and there you go. You can add them to your
Precisely.
squad. So I like that. rolling.
It fits so narratively.
Yeah, for sure.
It's perfect.
And then rolling into the next faction that they talked about was Astra Militarum, or Militarum. I say Militarum. Maybe that's just my redneck in me
It's
going to
it's the guard, man. It's the guard.
But and neither one of us play this army. I've often thought about it. But going into the theme, I don't want to spend too much time on Astra Militarum, but the guard, excuse me. But I like this army rule with the voice of command, and I know they've had this in previous editions. Again, I just think it's neat, the notion of a general or a commander giving orders, and then each phase you can give a different order where you can tell them to, all right, let's prepare to move faster, to take aim. Let's make sure that we hit the target, that we ready for melee, or that we take cover. I like all these different options, and it really makes, if I were to play a guard army, it makes me feel like I've got more of a command, not to be
Yeah.
overly use the word, but a command of the army. And then I roll in all these tanks with their upgraded guns. Feels like a legit squad. I like it.
I think that's very. Again, they're doing so much more with the thematic narrative kind of function of your army.
Yep.
And I like that. And because there's some guys who play this that they have some military experience, or they have some sort of background that plays to what they've lived.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it should, I don't want to say realistic because that's a little bit silly, but I think the mechanics should be like, this is a group of humans. They're a horde army as far as the board play goes. It should have like very, central nodes of command. You can't just have like weird little squads cobbled together, or a whole board full of tanks or whatever, but you should have like command structure in this army.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it begs for it.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm thinking about it. Of course, now I can, once I get my pile of potential completes, and then 10th edition, and et cetera, I could always pick up a combat patrol box. I mean, the rules are there; they're free. I can start on that. So, I like what they're doing in the theme. So, along with that, let's get on to the final two that we want to discuss. And I'll start off. This is my primary army of choice, the Leagues of Votann. And no, not just because they're so controversial or anything like that. I've been waiting for squats, dwarves. I've been waiting for that army for a long time. And that's the reason I play orcs, because they're kind of dwarf-like. It's the reason I played Space Wolves, because they're grizzled, grumpy old guys, and that's kind of how I see dwarves. So I've been waiting for the dwarves. When they came out with them, I was really excited. And now the 10th edition rules have been revealed, and and we don't have to go through all of the different, bits and bobs of these rules, but the core mechanic of the Leagues of Votann, of course, are the judgment tokens. And I always like casting judgment. That's one of my favorite things to do. It's just to sit back and curse people for playing the game. They've toned it down a little bit. Now you can't give more than 2 judgment tokens. And instead of the auto wound rule, which is what they had before, if you rolled if you had 2, 3 judgment tokens, if you hit on a 4-5 or a 4+ in some cases, that would auto wound, which was pretty nasty.
Tell me about it.
They have dialed that back a little bit, and now if you have 1 judgment token, all I get to do is add 1 to the hit roll. And then if you have 2 judgment tokens, which is the maximum that I can dole out, so you only get 2, judgment tokens. Only 2. I can only cast judgment out twice.
Okay.
Well, at least for the game, but I'll cast judgment out multiple times. You'll probably end up with 6 judgment tokens per model. Just be ready. I'm just going to dump them on the table.
Old Judge Judy.
But with a second judgment token, I do like the title though for the bonus, called "Now We've Got a Grudge to Settle." So you add 1 to the hit roll, add 1 to the wound roll, which is nice until you get down to some of the stats. With the Hearthkin Warriors, they have increased the ballistic skill. Now they only hit on 4+. which is not great. And they lowered the damage on some of this. I had my ion blasters. I used those a lot. Those were 2 damage apiece, and now they hit
Mm-hmm.
on 4s. They only do 1 damage. But looking at the new rules, they've got a lot of cool stuff. There's a stratagem that allows you to shoot after it's called active reprisal, where after the enemy has shot, if they've got 1 or more judgment tokens, I can do a shooting attack after your shooting phase, which is really cool. It's something that they had in ninth edition. I don't know. My overall take on Votann, they seemed like they nerfed him pretty hard, which is what we had talked about in previous
Yeah.
episodes. We were thinking this may happen. However, silver lining, I think that they've kept the core mechanic of the army, still the feel of the judgment tokens. What they have now focused on is depending on the points. If they lower the points, that means I get to put more dwarves on the table, which is everybody's favorite, and by everybody I mean mine. Um, but I get to put more models on the table, and it becomes less about just trying to shoot you off the board in turns 1 through 3, and then slowly make my way up with my short
Right.
legs to the objectives. Um, Now I think they're hopefully trying to spread this out so I keep more units on the board, or more as a variety of units, and use the warriors more as objective control, because now they've got sticky objectives, for example. That's a new ability that they're getting. So
Okay.
anyway, overall, I am cautiously optimistic, but um, I think the point of Votann is that they were a little too powerful for some in ninth edition, and now they've gone the opposite way. So I am waiting to see what they do with the characters. If the characters come out and give all kinds of buffs and rerolls and whatnot, then it'll offset some of this. But personally, as a Leagues of Votann player, I'm a little leery. But again, I don't I
Yeah.
don't play to win trophies. I just play because, frankly, I like to annoy people with the amount of judgment tokens I dole out. So
But not knowing what 10th's going to bring as far as what they're going to do fully with the strength versus toughness, which I assume is going to be similar to what it is
yeah,
now. Toughness 5 is pretty good though. I mean, that could really squeak out, just some hairline victories there.
yeah,
Because a Space Marine's only 4. Now you're talking 2 wounds versus 1, but toughness 5. I mean, that's like Terminator level toughness. So
yeah. But
that's not so
I
bad.
also feel like you're just trying to make me feel better right now.
Looking, I don't want to get
Sympathy.
judged.
Well, that's too late. You have now 24 judgment tokens. I
I'm just stacking them
I,
up,
I
buddy.
put them all in your drink, and you and blended them up, and now you've consumed them. But this is, and we'll get to this in the whole competitive versus social segment. But going from this into Necrons, which I know that you're a big Necron player, or at least someone who owns a lot of Necrons. You
Yeah,
know,
let's go.
a
Let's
lot of
let's, let's be
a
honest.
lot of a lot of cool new rules coming out for Necrons. What if you want to take us through a couple that were something that has you particularly interested in with Necrons?
So I like Necrons. I've only played maybe a 500 point game and then some boarding actions with them. I've always loved their ability to reanimate. I thought that was great. Uh, the reanimation protocols are not that bad to me. I've seen a lot of people sort of upset about it, but let's see. If your army faction is Necrons, at the end of your command phase, each unit from your army with this ability activates as reanimation protocols and reanimates D3 wounds each time such a unit reanimates
A
a wound.
wound, a wound, not a model this time. It's a
Not a model, but they're 1 wound
well,
models.
the warriors.
So,
Yeah,
yeah. So, I mean, you're talking bringing 3 warriors back, right? Am I reading that correct?
yeah, and I think the point of it is that yes, it's true. They have 1 wound apiece, which you still get that ninth edition feel, or even the eighth edition. Go back to eighth
Mm-hmm.
edition where you could restore whole models. But this time, I think this simplifies a little more, where it's focused around
Yes.
reanimating wounds, which you can
Right.
use to apply to the models, or you can heal your vehicles. I mean, they put the
Mm-hmm.
monolith on here. I don't know anybody that has a monolith, but
Oh man,
maybe
that's
that'll
thing's crazy.
maybe that'll change. You know, I don't know.
Right.
But now you can heal the monolith as well, because they flipped it from models to wounds.
Right. And that's good because I mean you do have several 3 wound models, like the Scorpec destroyers and some of those bigger, tougher things. So depending on what you have, you know, in combat or how whatever play style you like. But I like the idea because now you have to wipe out the whole unit. If you have warriors, if you say like you have a unit of 10 warriors, you got to lay 10 wounds down and wipe them all out, or
Just keep
3 of them will come back.
Yeah, and they did a good job with this, with the feeling of that you got to wipe them out, or they're going to
Yeah.
keep coming back. They're going to keep self healing, and to read the quote from someone at the Warhammer Studio at the bottom of the article, we wanted to capture the feeling that you are facing a slow, creeping, unending legion of deathless foes,
Mm-hmm.
and I like the idea of this imposing or impending doom whenever you're fighting an
Yes.
army, where whether if you're fighting orcs, you just, oh man, there's so many models on the table, they just keep coming. With the Necrons, the same feeling, like I cannot take these things out, they're just
Yes.
going to keep coming back. When you're playing knights, and you're a lowly guard, guardsman, running up and
Mm-hmm.
smacking the ankles of a gigantic titanic knight, you want that feeling of death and doom when you're playing something on a table, and then somehow squeak out a victory.
And Necrons were tailor made for this character sort of boss mechanic they're really um,
Mm,
pushing
there's a
here
lot of characters.
because yeah, they have a lot. Well, they have a lot of characters, but thematically and narratively, that's how they operate.
Yeah.
The Warriors don't do much of anything without having a crypt tech or an overlord or something. And you could, I think, I'm just guessing because I haven't really played them that much, but a minimum of 10 is what you have to field for Warriors, right?
Hmm.
Well, you can put up to 20. So I'm assuming they'll keep the resurrection orb with the overlord and stuff. So could you imagine a blob of 20 warriors with an overlord who's kind of protected because he's a character,
Yep.
um, and they'll just keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And if that doesn't work, you can just blast them once for the whole battle and bring back all 20.
Hmm.
I mean, it just narratively, it just looks cool to me.
Yeah, and I think they've done a really good job with the narrative. That's something that we keep talking about: the narrative, the theme, the feeling of this army being special or unique, that you're not going to get with another army, is important, because if they want you to buy more models, if they want you to, they're making all the rules free, they want you to get into it. You need each army to feel completely different than the previous one. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the reason I don't want necessarily another. I enjoy playing orcs, I enjoy playing space wolf, but I wanted something different, and I'm glad, and I've got some Necrons. I'm glad that they
Yeah.
just play differently, and I want that as a casual player. So, um,
Well, the warriors themselves, I'm just looking at this rule, their number is legion. So each time this unit's reanimation protocols activate, it reanimates D6
yeah,
wounds instead of
yeah,
D3. And then if you're in the range of objective, you get D3 plus 3. So you're going to get a minimum of 4 if you're on an objective.
mm-hmm. So
Um
four
and
warriors. So
up
you bring them up the board, you camp them on an objective,
mhm.
and as
It'd be
a
hard to
yeah,
budge.
if the opponent's there trying to shoot them off the board, you better take out all of them.
Yeah.
So they did a good job with this. I think, just even though we haven't seen all the rules, I'm excited to see
Right,
more.
right.
There are more factions coming out every single day, so we're going to see more in the weeks to come. And the hype is growing. I'm getting really excited to see Of course, especially orcs and some of the other chapters of Space Marines. Hopefully, we'll see soon. But man, all kinds of good stuff coming out. So let's switch over now to one of the topics that I think goes, part and parcel with, especially the last two factions that we talked about, with the Votann and Necrons and the theme, and more or less the reaction from I would say, the more vocal community, which would be the competitive players. So, I think there is this difference, or two camps, if you will, with any hobby, where you've got the really hardcore folks that have been playing the game for a long time. They go to tournaments, they buy anything and everything, and they are there to win and play a bit of math hammer, if you will. Um, and I've seen some, and you made a comment earlier about it. I've seen some negative comments, and I just heard, listening to one of the YouTube channels talk about the reaction to the leagues of Votann, and just how disappointed they were in the rules and all of this. And I just never, even though the Votann rules got nerfed, especially in ninth edition, and they're getting nerfed again supposedly in 10th. We've only seen one page, but
Yeah.
I know you've seen this a lot too, where it's like this doom and gloom whenever new rules come out, because the percentages are now thrown off. And personally, as a casual player, and Steve, I'm interested to get your perspective on this too, is that that is assuming whenever the negative stuff comes out about a certain unit, or the points changes, whatever, that assumes that every player that I am playing against, including myself, is doing math hammer and playing the laws of averages and the percentages, and doing this
Right.
like a casino. um, and I don't play that way. And so, really, all those opinions are just that. And I guess maybe my question to you is that it is the competitive scene coming in any time Games Workshop comes out with a new rule or a new mode, or points update, and they immediately analyze it to death. Does that suck the fun out of it for you?
It doesn't for me, because I mean, it stresses it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But you just have to not pay attention to it. I because it's so easy to get into that, like, oh man, I need these models because that's what everyone says is the best. Best at what, you know? Because I mean, making you happy, then they're all great,
Mm,
you know. I guess because I've never played at a competition, I don't necessarily understand that scene, and so I shouldn't necessarily take a dump on it,
yeah, sure.
but it's rather annoying, and that's why I don't deal with that scene, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, I get into this to have fun. I like the models. I like putting them together. I like painting them. I like interacting with people on a tactile 3D level that's not, you know, far off across the computer.
Hmm.
I like being around people who want to nerd out and just have a good time with the similar things that we're doing. And if I wanted to play averages and math hammer it out, I'd go play poker or blackjack, or I'd go bet on horses, or I would do something like that. But for me, this is a relaxing hobby. Um, I like playing a game. I like building an army that looks like it came out of one of the novels, because I do like to read the books.
Mm,
So I think that when I read the books, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I could put an army together that looks like this, and that would be like what I'm reading now, and that feels good. That gives you that good positive feedback. And I don't I don't want to like percentage it to death, because that seems just kind of yucky and boring,
yeah.
and it takes the fun out of it for me. Because if I was going to do that, I just go try and make money in the stock market. Um, I like what I like is I like the challenge of putting together the army that I like, that looks cool, and now I'm forced to figure out a way to make that army competitive. Like, that's what a general would do. That's what because you don't always have control over your assets, I guess, in anything in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Whether, it's your job, my job, you have to do what you have to do with what you have,
Yeah.
sometimes. And I think that would be, and it's more fun for me to kind of think of a go around with what I have available, what I have in front of me, what I liked and what I enjoyed putting together, what I think looks cool, the rule of cool. And now it's my job to make that work. Um, I don't want to sit at home and build a list on Battlescribe and like, that's it. That's all I got to do.
Yeah.
Now I just got to put it on the board and roll dice.
Yeah.
That's boring. That's
I,
boring.
I agree. And if to me, whenever and I've seen new rules come out for, what was it for the like last year, the Space Marines, when they had a typo or something on the Warcom site where they listed what are the jetpack guys, the flying guys, the Space Marines, are they're not
Oh,
aggressors, are they? I can't remember, but the
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 Inceptors.
Inceptors, and I want to say it was
Yes, the Plasma Inceptors specifically.
I want to say it was the Inceptors when they came out with some new rule and they lowered the points and it was
Mm-hmm.
a bit of a
Yep.
typo. And I saw like they were immediately out of stock everywhere. So people were going out and buying 20 boxes of these things.
Yep.
And I thought, what? I mean, if you were to watch a movie and all you saw, like I keep going back to, let's say it's Star Wars, and all you had was just not even yeah, you're gonna have, there's lots of different versions of stormtroopers, but if all you had was just the general, base level stormtrooper for the entire army, you had no characters, you had no vehicles of any kind, no cool ships, no,
Mm-hmm.
not even stormtroopers with like, larger cannons or crazy guns or anything. It was just the base level and you just had thousands of that versus thousands of Jedi with green lightsabers, and that's it. Like nobody.
That's
I
it.
mean, it's like what a boring movie. I mean, I want to watch
Yeah.
something with a lot of variety. That's how these battles are played out. So, um, I mean, I
What?
don't want to keep going on and on about
Yeah.
this necessarily as a negative thing. I think it's important, you and I both are 100% aligned on that. It's important just to maintain the rule of cool and be go into Warhammer, go into the hobby because you think the models look cool, that the narrative sounds cool, and the game is balanced enough, and you're going to have a good time no matter which army you pick.
Yeah. You just have to remember they're selling a product, so that like you and I've talked about before, they're going to balance the game to sell their product, and the intention is for you to go across the product line.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a bad intention. They're a company. That's what they're supposed to do. But their intention is to build a game so you can, if you wanted to buy every model in your faction, I feel like the way the initial rules are written, that's the balance. But play what you want, enjoy it. Don't and definitely don't freak out about the rules right now, because we don't even know what they're going to
Yeah.
be for real.
Yeah, I think keeping calm, with all the new rules
Mm-hmm.
coming out, and not flipping out whenever they announce a new, Votann, for example. People are flipping out
Mm-hmm.
about, oh well, Votann's completely nerfed and they're terrible. Like, look, they only showed like one single page and a couple of core rules and two data sheets. Like that, I want to see three data sheets maybe. I want to see more because that's what makes the army. And I've seen this so many
Yeah.
times where they announce something new, a new unit, and everybody just goes over the deep end and either writes off the army or says the game's immediately unbalanced. And I think perspective is important, and also to remember that Games Workshop is a company and they want to, as a product line, as you stated, they want to, in the sales world, it's called land and expand. So they want to get
Mm.
you in the door. You buy a product and then they want you to keep doing that. Broaden your horizons a little bit, buy more armies.
That's right.
Well, I think we've beat this one to death, but successfully.
You could just have a warp rift before you read the rules, and
or
you'll be all
or two
right.
or three. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be okay.
Well, one last segment that we have is our hobby corner, and it does go along with what we had just mentioned previously in our previous segments. And for me, this is about trying to help our listeners and ourselves really stay motivated, because you've got this huge pile of potentially a huge pile of potentially, as a mouthful.
Yeah,
You've got,
exactly.
because some people don't always have one. Maybe you're really really good about keeping up with it, but you got 10th edition coming out. You got a new box set. You got all these models, and as older dads, I've got family and I've got responsibilities. I've got children. They have school and all kinds of stuff going on the weekend. My wife going on trips, all kinds of stuff. And how do you? A question I ask myself a lot: how do I stay? How do I stay motivated to keep my priorities straight? Of course, but I did want to give a few tips for those dads listening, especially, or even if you're not a dad and you just find yourself really busy. Um, a tip for staying motivated so that your models don't just sit unassembled in a box in the shrink wrap, unpainted on the table, and then when the new thing comes out, you go buy that, and now you're building up a closet of potential. That's what we talked
Mm,
about previously.
yeah,
So
I know about that.
I got three tips for you. The first one is to just do one. I'll put that in air quotes. Just do one, meaning
Hmm.
clip out one model, file down one section, remove the mold lines on one model or one piece, paint one color, get them spray painted, get your base coat down, glue one piece together. The point is to just get one done, because one turns into two, turns into three,
Hmm.
turns into four, and all of a sudden you've got three or four models assembled, or you've got two or three painted, and you don't have to complete the entire army in one evening. So that's my first tip: just do one. Second tip: give yourself a deadline, meaning, I live and die by my calendar, my schedule, for
Yeah.
work, and everything is an appointment nowadays. So give yourself, I'm not saying create Warhammer appointments. I mean, I guess if you want to, I mean, that's like a good idea. I'm a pretty huge dork, so I'd probably create that in my calendar. But give yourself a deadline on when you should be completing your pile of potential or painting something. Um, you know, put it out there in your head. No new purchases before you finish the stuff that you have. Now, I'm going to say that because I'm a huge hypocrite when it comes to
I
that,
hear you.
about buying the new thing, and you still got something in a shrink wrap. I haven't done that too much, um, but give yourself a deadline. 10th edition's coming out. There's a new box set. There's all kinds of new stuff. Get your pile of potential done before June. So you got 3 weeks. See what you can get done. Get one unit done, and one unit may turn into two. Very last tip is, remember that this is actually, the hobby itself is a good mental health um, thing to do. It is just like exercise or reading. I mean, it is painting. Painting is
Hmm.
therapeutic. It is modeling is therapeutic, and it can remove stress. It takes your mind off things. You're going to find that while you're doing it, you can't concentrate really on anything else. You have to. It's a casual concentration. It's not stressful
Hmm.
concentration. So remember that this is a hobby, and that your mental health is important, especially nowadays with everybody working remote, working hybrid potentially. Um, and remind yourself that even working 30 minutes on a model is going to benefit you in your personal life. It's going to give you that breath of fresh air. Definitely still recommend going outside, taking a walk, and things like that. But remember that this is a hobby, and it can be like chicken soup for the soul a little bit. So
Hmm.
that's my final one. Steve, any additional tips or anything to add on to that?
Now, I like to just do one, I, especially if you're just getting into it. Like, I have the ability because I just did it. I banged through that nearly 700 points of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't recommend doing that at all. In fact, especially if you're just starting, I would never do more than 5 for set like at one time, because batch painting and army paintings is not easy. And the problem is, especially if you're just starting out and just practicing, your 20th model is going to look a lot better than your first model.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So I think if you lump it in groups of 5, because that's kind of how the game is structured, right? Or groups of 3, depending on, what size model or whatever you're doing. Let's just call it 1 unit at a time. How about that? Yeah. Just focus on no more than 1 unit at a time. And that follows just do 1. You'll get a certain level of painting done with that. Your next unit will be better than that one because it's just practice and muscle memory, and then so on and so on. And then you might look back at that very first unit that you did and you might want to redo it, or you may not. You might like it, and just, I don't know, you can do whatever colors, you can do whatever you want to with this, but just enjoy it. I would say give yourself a deadline. That's a good one, man.
Yeah.
I'm not good about that, but I'm weird. I have like sometimes a chaotic workflow in my head. Sometimes I just have to have a palate cleanser. I want to keep doing it, but I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I'm going to do some training today. So I can jump around a little bit like that.
Mix it up, right? I mean, it's like that. That's the other thing about just doing one is do one of something different. Don't just do 50 Space Marines. Do a 5 Space Marines, and then if you're big into Space Marines, move on to a vehicle or something different, or a character, and just do one, and make it the focus of your evening or your hobby time. Just do one. And hopefully by then you do that enough times over the next few weeks, before you know it, you're ready for 10th edition and you're feeling good about your pilot potential, and you're ready to take on the new box, the new stuff, all all the hype that's coming in. And so hopefully, these tips will help you stay motivated and to get through your pilot potential, move forward, and just feel better about your hobby in general.
Yeah, and unless you're like scrolling through the Dad Hammer Instagram page or something like that.
Oh, shameless plug.
If you if you have 30 minutes to just endlessly scroll on social media, man, just go sit at your desk for 30 minutes and clip out some models and do a little sanding, do a little gluing, and it's just, you'll feel better about it.
That's right.
And you'll get something done.
Yeah. So look at all of our stuff
first.
Quickly. Do it in 30 seconds. Just rip through it, and then go work on your potential. That's the lesson.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's the lesson.
Well, that will wrap our show for this episode of Dad Hammer. I very much enjoyed it. I enjoyed my cocktail. Steve, I hope you're still upright and not too tipsy with your tipsy turtle.
The keel is still in the water.
Your warp rift, excuse me. That's much more imposing. But thank you for listening to this episode of Dad Hammer. Thank you, Medicae Steve. Thank you to these delicious drinks. I am the Warboss, and we'll see you next time on Dad Hammer. Cheers, Steve. Have a good week.
Cheers, David. You too.